Welcome. So, today we are going to be talking about texture. And one thing about texture, so this is a continuation of our last video. Last time we talked about, so it's more dealing with the translucent object, and we're looking at how light pass through translucent objects, and then we get this subsurface scattering. So that was what we were talking about the last time. So, and I said today we are going to be talking about texture, surface. And one thing with texture has to do with form, but not only that, function also. And why I say form and function, it's for one reason. We already know that form follows function, but texture goes with both, because sometimes texture go with function, but sometimes it also go with form. And form here meaning design. In art, we all know when we talk about a round object or a round form, and we say when we have a round form or a round object, this can signify happy, smile, playful, soft, something smooth. But that is following function. That is design following function. You want to create a character that is approachable, friendly, a protagonist. We go with circle. That is form following function. But at the same time, we can still have a character that is round and smooth, but is a villain. So that is something we need to understand, because, and that is the whole thing about texture. We can have a surface um, of a character of a form that doesn't go with what it's meant for. So a texture, for example, let's create an earlier. For example, we have a form, and this form function is to be a box, but at the same time we can have a box that has, let's say, spikes, but it's still a box. And this is just at a base level. I'm explaining this as a base level, but at the overall it's still a box, but now there are new elements and new surface, let's say surface or texture. I'm just explaining this at a base level, so even a 5-year-old will understand. But it's still a box, but we have new attribute, new things added to it to not necessarily exaggerate the function, but the form, the design. So this is the same thing I was talking to you about, where texture don't only follow function. Texture is not like form. Form follows function, but sometimes it goes away from that idea and stand on its own. We have this thing occurring in real life, in reality, but also we can play with these things in our own design. We can play with it in our own art. We can play with it just to create something nice. I don't have much example for this kind of thing, because it's more logical, but it's more not it's logical, yes, realistic, but it's also something abstract, something we play with in our own design. For example, you are looking at a robot. So this is one of my work I did for a crypto project, a Web2 project. This is a robot, but it's the main character. And some people will say anything that is, straight, or let me get a better color so we can see it. Anything in these forms, anything strong, rigid, angular like this can't be playful. But you can look at the character. He looks calm. Has playing with most of those ideas. So the idea of texture, we'll go into fully into texture soon, but I wanted to give you this abstract example that texture can break away from function. But now, talking about texture, let's go back to texture now. So keep this in mind when you are designing your stuff. Now let's go to texture. What the general common idea when texture is mentioned. Texture has to do with the surface, and most of the time texture is talked about in relation to light, because texture is just the surface we see reacting to light or value. So if you have light shooting from this point, then depending on the kind of texture we have, here these parts will be in shadow, 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 shadow. Okay, as you get closer to the light, it changes. So we have shadow here. So shadow, 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 shadow. And then at this point, it's reacting to the light. We have light at this point. So texture, the surface, is mainly interaction with the light. You can is the feel or shape of a surface or substance. So the same way we talked about texture following form and function, texture in reaction to light also follow surface and substance. You can get a form with a given texture, and the texture is mainly because of how the form feels. So, but take note, it all still depends on the way the light reacts on that form. And texture can't stand alone without light. Take note of that. Light affects texture, especially when we are not feeling it. It's not something we are touching, something we are seeing, because we are talking about art here. We're not talking about necessarily maybe sculpting. Sculpting now, we are going into a different area that has to do truly with substance and what you feel. But for artists, you can create something that feels different. For example, remember we were talking about this. You can see the way I played with the water in this image. When I was painting it, my mind was, is the water clean? And I prefer a clean water. Maybe you get a blue a blue color or a cool warmth to the water, and then maybe it becomes transparent and you can clearly see what's underneath the water. But I was thinking maybe the water is not really that clean, so I played with the surface a little bit. But also you can see the way I played with the, let's zoom in a little bit, you can see the way I played with the color also. Let me give you show you the way how I created the stuff you are seeing now. I was using this brush. Excuse me. So first you come up with the color underneath. because water is transparent. So what are we seeing under or inside under the water, that is under, that is keeping the water, that is holding the water, the container. So first thing, we have this form, then at the edge, at this point, we have this edge here, and I looked at the edge and it was green, a little bit green, so I pushed that, and then you can see that blue. I added that, not this blue, it's something like this, and this is the way I painted it, the same exact way I painted it. So you can see I was always using this soft brush to soften the whole thing. Why? Because of what we talked about in our last video, refraction. Well, I made a mistake before we talked about refraction. That was when we talked about subsurface scattering. So take note of that. The videos are there. We talked about refraction, and that is the reason why I was always softening the form or the texture underneath the water, because it's being distorted because of refraction. So when I had something like this, I'm not going to paint the whole thing. The next thing I did was start to play with those stuff you are seeing here. So I added stuff like this to show that it's sitting on the surface of the water. Then I started adding leaves on top of the water. You can see how it's very easy. Then I was thinking of the lights, and the light is coming from this point. So I had my leaves on the water, so I put this little light on top of the leaves to show the position the light is coming from. Then I brought this little line, little shot of light on top of the water to show that, oh, this is the surface. And I pushed, and see the characters are playing with the water, so I added some bubbles. I pushed those water in the front. You can see the same thing we've created here, and this is the way I paint. So it's not that hard. Pay attention. It's like this is just talking about the surface of the water, because I mentioned it in our last video, so I wanted to keep to it. You have a container. So this is what we first started painting. The container was holding the water, and then you don't need to focus on these parts, the water itself, the form. No, focus on the texture. Not texture, the surface. I still call it texture. So that was how I painted this painting. So I hope I've passed on a little knowledge, and it's not that hard. It's just something you need to be focused on. You need to know what you are doing. It's not something you guess or you wait to get what they call it, beautiful mistake. You need to know what you are doing. I can paint the same painting countless times. So I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.